It's the last SDL of the year. Really, the last one of this year. Can you believe it? Today on SDL, Russ is out sick. He caught something eating shawarma from street vendors or something, I guess. I don't know. I didn't ask. He just said he was sick. So, but me, am going to rattle on about cross-site scripting attacks and how they work, and maybe some things you could do to watch out for them, because these are attacks that are a lot more common than bad shawarma, which I have never had any bad shawarma, but these attacks are definitely very common. So on the final SDL of 2018, stick around.
This is a Security Weekly production.
Welcome to Secure Digital Life. If your users are going to keep putting risky stuff on your machine, you're screwed. So talk and help us understand the complexity of blockchain.
I was reading through the show notes, man, and oof.
In binary, it would be 001. Who cares? But it's probably not significant anyway. Be like you're looking out through the HAL dot, like, hey, Dave, Dave.
It's like Sims, but with,
It would be like Sims.
Instead of AI, it's only.
Accredited by Microsoft, Cisco, NetApp, IDLE, Oracle, and EC Council, QuickStart delivers high-impact, low-cost IT training through its cognitive learning platform in multiple domains. With QuickStart, you get an ever-growing catalog of courses, self-paced courses offered through a monthly subscription, virtual classrooms offered through an annual subscription, peer-to-peer learning, mentoring, official courses, certified instructors, hands-on labs, and more. For more information, visit www.quickstart.com. Use coupon code PAUL20 to get 20% off on all cybersecurity courses. Quick Start, creating world-class technologists. Are you working on earning your Security Plus certification? Earn your certification faster and smarter with Cybex. Their courses and guides are compiled with CompTIA-approved content, providing you with the knowledge to be fully prepared on exam day. The Cybex Security Plus Gold course includes a partner-to-you pass guarantee. Users enjoy free course updates and repeats until you pass the Security Plus exam. Learn more and register for a free trial today at cybex.com/go/free trial. When you are ready to purchase, save 50% with code SECURITY50. Hurry, this offer ends December 31st. It's the end of the year almost, and at the end of the year, it's almost time for you to start planning for next year's cons, because guess what? They're coming up already. So if you're planning to go to RSA Conference, well, RSA Conference 2019 is the place to be for the latest in cybersecurity data, innovation, and thought leadership. March 4th through 8th in San Francisco. We'll come alive with cybersecurity's brightest minds. They gather together to discuss the industry's newest developments. Go to rsaconference.com/securityweekly-US19 to register now using the discount code 5U9SWFD. That's 5 Uniform, Niners, Sierra, Whiskey, Foxtrot, Delta. I think I remembered all those. To receive $100 off a full conference pass to RSA Conference in San Francisco, which is a really big one, and it's a lot of fun. I was there last year. If you're interested in quality over quantity and having meaningful conversations instead of just a badge scan, join us April 1st through the 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort for InfoSec World 2019, where you can connect and network with like-minded individuals in search of actionable information. Lots of syllables. Use the registration code OS19-SECWEEK for 15% off the main conference or World Pass. Again, that's another fun one. We were there last year. There was a hurricane, but it didn't, or a tornado or something, but it didn't actually come anywhere near us. It just was off in the distance looking interesting. So be sure and check those out as you start planning your cons for this year. Lots of cons, and of course, all through the summer and the con season in general. Well, today, by request, some people asked that I would talk about cross-site scripting. And Microsoft, as nearly as I could tell, took credit for the name cross-site scripting from way back in 2000. And I remember reading about it, but I couldn't remember. I never could find exactly what I read back in 2000, but that's what the credit is for. So these are attacks, and they're really old attacks. I mean, they're still completely germane. They're still very relevant today. But they're old attacks that were some of the first things that we saw people doing on the World Wide Web or the interweb or whatever you want to call it. And they're really, really common. And even today, if you go look at like OWASP or any of these kind of guides, this is the stuff that hackers were learning to do as baby hackers. And they persist up into the world. And today in OWASP, if you look at their top vulnerability list, this is still going to be right up there with one of the top vulnerabilities that people are going to find. Now, they can just be embarrassing. And in the early days of the internet, embarrassing was more common, I think, than today, where we've kind of become less embarrassed in general because we're used to things like Facebook and Instagram and all these things where people post embarrassing things all the time. But they can actually become true threat vectors to your site. They can definitely become threat vectors to your customers and or whomever, or even just to you. And they can even lead to, they're really good ways to embed phishing attacks too. So I've seen all those kind of attacks embedded in cross-site scripting attacks. So I'll give you a very simple example of something analog to help you have sort of a way to envision what cross-site scripting attacks are. So if you imagine an old cork board, like, and people still have these things, like what they really called a bulletin board back in the day, and a cork board that had like push pins on it, and people put notices up about, apartments for rent, roommates wanted, all those kind of things. Let's just say somebody puts up a picture of a dog, and it says, please adopt me. I'm going to be euthanized if you don't adopt me in the next 24 hours. And we see these ads all the time on Facebook and things too. But let's just put up a picture on the old cork board with a push pin, and it says, please adopt me, call this number. So you feel bad and you say, oh, what a cute dog. I really don't want to see the dog get put down, old yeller kind of stuff, and you call the number. And you get hit with a local politician sales pitch for something that they're advocating. That is essentially what a basic kind of cross-site scripting attack could do, is just redirect you off to something else. And early on, so before Facebook, before the Bobbsey twins and Mark Zuckerberg and all those kind of people up at MIT started building these kind of apps, there were bulletin board systems that existed on private networks that were set up forever and ever. People dialed into them and all this kind of weird stuff. But bulletin board systems have been around since pretty much we've had computers. And as we started to have the internet, people were putting up bulletin boards. And what they were doing was they were embedding things in the bulletin boards themselves. So another example of this would be putting a link in some text on a post. So, and you can do this. This is totally legitimate thing to do. So if you put a link, like I was putting up some de-untoward videos the other day, which if you've never seen de-untoward, go check that out. Well, actually, don't do that. No, don't ever go check out de-untoward unless you really, really want to. But I was putting up some videos about de-untoward, and you embed the link in Facebook. Okay, no big deal. Everybody does that. But what if I embedded a link and it said, check out this new de-untoward video that's completely crazy? And you click the link and it redirects you to a phishing site, or it redirects you to a political ad or something like that. Well, today we typically call that trolling, or it's just an undesirable behavior, and it can even be called phishing. But again, that's a kind of type of cross-site scripting attack, and we pretty much have to let people paste things on these sites, because if we can't put things up on Facebook, Instagram, etc., they kind of cease to have a purpose. Now, the earliest kinds of these things really revolved around other types of sites where you were actually putting things in boxes. So it says enter your name to enter the contest and things like that. But a really simple one that you might have been able to do on Facebook at some point in time would have been to put up a site that's a picture that says pretty kitty. And if in the comment space I put up a link that says click this link to see a really pretty kitty. Well, if that link drops you onto a malware site or a clickbait site or anything else, again, it's kind of today categorized as phishing, but it's another type really of cross-site scripting. Now, these are not sophisticated, so you got to understand that. The ones I'm giving you right now are not really cross-site scripting in a modern sense of the word. They're just phishing, trolling kind of stuff. But it really is the essence of how cross-site scripting starts to work. Every bit of this Every cross-site scripting attack essentially relies on the ability of someone, a third party, to push information onto a web page somehow. So the idea that you can put something up in front of people that they will see that could then trigger something to happen is what the essence of cross-site scripting is. So it's like, oh, gee, that's what Facebook is all about. In fact, these bulletin board systems are in and of themselves cross-site scripting because anything you can put on there. But today, we really see this had become a more sophisticated, and it's been that way all along, really, but today we don't include all those phishing attacks and so on. But phishing in and of itself is what is called a reflective cross-site scripting attack for the most part. So reflective attacks, so these are called client-side reflected attacks, are not necessarily persistent. They are things you could push up on a Snapchat. They are things you could push up on a Facebook post. And all this stuff doesn't work now because they've taken action to stop it. But if these sites were not coded effectively, so that means that somebody didn't build the website correctly, what happens is I can push something on there and it can result in people seeing it. And it may not last very long because I put it up in a comment on, say, a gaming forum. And somebody says, how do I keep my people from dying in RimWorld? How do I get better weapons in Fortnite? And there's a long set of forum posts there. If somebody actually starts cross-site scripting this and the site would allow it, then all of a sudden you can get these kind of client-side reflective attacks. Typically, reflective attacks are much more like my bulletin board attack up there, which rely on you to do something. So that means that the person has to actually do something, click a link, click a button, do something to trigger it, and it's usually just pasted into a comment. So those are very simple types of attack. So let's talk about how that kind of attack might actually work. Let's just say that you put up a page that you paste it. So it's not your server, it's someone else's server. And you just go on a forum about RimWorld or Fortnite or whatever it is, and you take that picture and you put it in the forum comments on the site. Okay. So here's where the cross-site scripting attack actually kind of comes from. If it's just a link, so if you could build a script, now think about this. So let's talk for a second about how you could build a script. The most common kind of script would be JavaScript, right? Okay, so you have a JavaScript, PHP, Flash, even PDFs and things allow scripts to be run. Even a Word file can actually contain an automated macro that is web-enabled today. So any of those kind of things that could be put in front of somebody, you could literally trigger that with a mouse over. So in JavaScript, there is a mouse over command. So it detects a mouse moving across a certain thing. So my sort of, please don't do this stuff. My sort of idea would be to put something odd. And this is back to clickbait psychology. So we all know about clickbait. And if we start thinking about clickbait psychology, how do you get somebody to click something? Well, and this is completely non-scientific, let me tell you. My approach to clickbait psychology is people love to click on things they can't quite see or something that suggests they're going to see something else. So, for instance, if you put up a picture of Miley Cyrus's outfit on Saturday Night Live last weekend, where the whole scene, everybody was sitting there going, is that going to like fly open? And okay, you put up a really small picture of it and go, see it all right here. People might move their mouse over that. They might even click on it. And if they do that, then it becomes sort of a more direct kind of thing. But the mouse over itself can be detected on that site by if the script is actually live running. So what if I put my cat picture up and it says, check out this cat. And now the picture is really small. And as you move your mouse over it, the mouse over actually triggers a script. So what could the script do to you there? Well, the most common kind of thing that gets done right there, at least the most valuable thing, and that's if it's not just pure mischief. So it can be something where it pops up a funny picture on your page or something like that. It can also be a fake defacement. So it could pop up a version of the website that's funny, or it's got swastikas on it or whatever kind of thing. But it could also do something where it, say, grabs all your cookies. Because remember, if the browser, and some of this is a little dated, but the idea is the same. If the browser is allowing the script to run, So when that script runs in the browser that's on your machine, so the client side, and you mouse over that picture of Miley or the cat or whatever it is, and that mouse over triggers my script, one of the things it could do is grab the cookies on your browser. Now, again, I know today we've taken a lot of action to prevent this from happening, but people were getting trapped by these things all the time. The even more insidious part of this is that JavaScript could run, and if it doesn't actually do anything visual, you don't even know it ran. Because what it could do is it could just grab all your cookie information and then send that off somewhere, send it to my site, and I collect all your cookie information. And people were doing this like crazy. So that script was getting run with the permission level of the browser. So now we're back to Hacking 101. Hacking 101 says you have to escalate your permissions. Well, if I can escalate my permissions without even bothering to escalate my permissions by getting you to do something, I don't have to worry about being clever. I can get you to do it for me. How are you running on your system? Well, you're probably administrator. So if you're administrator on the system and your browser is running as you, administrator, and the script can run as administrator, it can do whatever it wants. It can go in and grab all the stuff out of your address book if it has access to that. It can grab all the cookies in your browser and send them forward. What kind of stuff would be in there? Well, if you've ever done any, we should do a show about cookies sometime, but think about the stuff that's in your cookies right now. So you're in a browser watching this show, most likely. Did you allow your browser to log into YouTube automatically? Meaning when you type YouTube or you type Facebook or wherever you're watching, or you type Security Weekly, did you allow your login to that site to be stored? Well, then that's a cookie. So the cookie's on your machine. And modern browsers tend to be a lot more protective of that cookie data than they used to be. Even just a few years ago, a lot of that cookie data was stored in the clear. That means it was just plain text on your system. It contained all kinds of information, and it could be retrieved with a simple scripting command. Just cookie.data contained all the cookie data in the browser. And because you were doing it, remember? You were doing it, not me. I wasn't out there being some uber hacker. I was just sitting at home waiting for you to mouse over that picture of Miley. And when you moused over the picture of Miley, boom, the script runs. It runs as administrator. It can grab all the stuff out of your browser and send it straight to me. And if you put those instructions in there, then all of a sudden it becomes a real problem. So in the reflective type attacks, how were people getting these things up on the site? So this is I guess the true essence of a reflective cross-site scripting attack then. I know you've seen a site that has boxes on it, right? I mean, you go to Facebook, you go to Instagram, okay, boxes where you can type. But for a long time, you saw websites just starting to add this. So when this first started happening, you would see people say, comment. Like, ooh, I can type something. Where does that comment go? And this is sort of the basis of this whole problem. Where did the comment actually go? When you typed a comment on, we'll just say an early shopping site like Amazon, when you went on Amazon, it said, write a review. Where does the comment itself get stored? Well, it may persist on the page. It may be in the database. What if I could put a script command there? I mean, they expect you to type your last name, right? It says, what's the subject line of your comment? But what if in that subject line you could type a script command? You could. And if you could type that script command, it's not seen. It just got embedded in there. And sometimes you could see them, but if it wasn't seen, that's really awesome, right? Because now it's just sitting there on that page. And when somebody goes to view your comment, what do they get? They get your comment, which says, I would buy this product because it's really, really cool. But what they also got on that page was a script that ran and grabbed your cookies. And this became the very basis of reflective cross-site scripting attacks. Now today, we don't really see that because so many sites have comments that people have actually started writing better websites and they started taking action to prevent these kind of things from happening and allowing people to paste them in, but it's still out there. And it's not old sites, it's new sites that are not very well put together. Now another basis for cross-site scripting attacks is called a persistent attack. And persistent cross-site scripting in some ways is much more damaging because it can affect a lot of people. Although with these comment sites, how many people read that comment? You look on there and go, wow, 4 million people read this comment. Now, that was my site. That was my comment about that. But I mean, your comments probably don't get nearly as many hits as mine do. Right. But if PewDiePie puts up a comment on something, a lot of people see it. And so it's bad. But a lot of people, they write a review and, there's thousands of reviews and nobody may even look at the thing or they may not click on that or whatever. But if the persistent cross-site scripting attack comes into play, all of a sudden it's something that actually gets on the page. Now, this is where it gets tricky. Today, you have sites like Facebook, like Instagram, where people post things constantly. And those comments are now not just brief. They're not like messaging stuff. They actually persist. They go into a database and they stay in that database forever unless you go in and delete them. So if somebody pushes a comment, and again, Facebook is not subject to this that I'm aware, but I keep using them as an example because it's such a good visual and everybody kind of has seen it. If you push a comment onto Facebook and say, hey, Doug, cool picture, but you also push the script in, it won't let you do it. It will block you from actually doing that unless you do something incredibly clever that we haven't thought of yet, or that they haven't thought of yet. And if that got in that database, every time somebody went back to that site, if their browser would allow it, so notice there's lots of layers now of things preventing this from happening. If that was just laying there, every time somebody went there to check that out, guess what? That script would run again. And I could use that to collect tons and tons and tons of information. Now, like I said, I've also seen this used, this script redirect, where somebody puts the script in. And if you want to see the format of some of these scripts, I put some in the show notes, and I've got a lot of other commentary in the show notes where I wrote some different examples and things. If you went in and you put a script that redirected to a page, this was an early type of defacement. And this is still done today. So sometimes you'll see defacements. And the defacement, if you don't know what, it's where you go to CNN.com, and instead of CNN.com, you get, CNN.com, and it says, D. White was here or whatever across the middle of it. That basically then becomes a defacement type attack. And people were doing that with scripting redirects early on. Today, again, most websites are preventing these type of redirects from being allowed by your browser. So that means when you open CNN.com, it doesn't have an invisible scripting command there on the page that somebody pushed into a comment, and it redirects you somewhere else. Likewise, we still see a lot of development sites now like WordPress. And so I'm not going to pick, I know people like to pick on WordPress, but it's widely used. WordPress initially had a lot of vulnerabilities to this because WordPress basically said, we're not responsible for your building or your programming ability. And because of that, people built a lot of really bad websites because they made it easy. So today when you see these things saying build your website here, it's going to be a very easy thing to do. You may run into the problem of that site, or you may be assuming that somebody's going to take care of it and the site itself may not do very much for you. The other side of this that's true, that really is still a kind of cross-site scripting attack, I wouldn't call it the pure form of cross-site scripting, which relies on a third party. But I mean, if someone breaks into a machine and they embed these kind of script tags in that site, because they actually did break into the machine using some other tactic, that's another type of persistent threat, right? I mean, they could go in there and put that scripting tag in there. I don't really call those cross-site scripting because it doesn't involve them pushing that in there. I've also seen these where links were embedded in comments and people click the link. They think they're going to another thread. If you've ever used any kind of forum, you've seen people saying, this really isn't an appropriate comment here. See the real answer to this question right here and click the link. And I know that all of you have clicked one of those links and didn't look at it very carefully. So you saw that, you were trying to find a solution to the problem. My machine keeps doing this. And you see somebody that says, none of these answers my question, and somebody says, yeah, here, go read the real answer. And you click on this link without looking at it very carefully. You've probably at some point written a comment in a guest book section or looked at the comments in a guest book section, all these kind of things. And every one of these at least has the potential to be a cross-site scripting based attack on you. And so it's really kind of scary because you start thinking about, what did I put in my browser? Did I save my password? Do I have credit card information stored in my browser? How is it being stored? Who's keeping up with it? And can document.cookie be used to pull that right out with a JavaScript? And the answer is, it's possible. And you need to be worried about this, because this is one of the most insidious, subtle things that somebody can actually do. Now, yeah, if you go in there and you slap it up and it says site owned by D. White, that's not subtle. But if I'm on there grabbing things like your cookies, you might not even know I did it. And if it grabbed it and it sent it to me, you didn't even see it happen. Nothing happened. You got the page you were looking for, and you seem pretty happy with that. What really happened was I got information out, and then I went ahead and gave you what you were looking for, the picture of Miley or the picture of the cat. And you may have tons and tons of content in your browser that you should be aware of. So I want to go on then and talk a little bit about some things you can do that may help you to prevent all this. Now, everything that allows script, so that, and I'm going to list some of the scripting languages. So PHP, HTML, JavaScript, Flash, all those pieces or coding languages or scripting languages allow for people to embed commands in them. So any web page that you've ever heard of or ever seen effectively allows something to be executed. Today, almost every site has interactive content on it. So that means that there are windows, there are boxes, there are pieces of it, and all of it can be actually executing code. So this is not like the internet was 10, 15 years ago, where a lot of pages were just static pages and they didn't do anything. So what that means is that back then, I had to get you to execute something. So I had to get you to click on an exe file or something like that to run it on your local machine. But today, that website you're looking at is actually doing things while you're doing it. This is how people collect information. So they pull it off your cookies. They look at your search history. They set cookies that track these things. So a lot of times people are allowing these things to be set, which are really kind of cross-site scripting attacks in and of their own right, even though they're totally legitimate and being put on there by Amazon or whomever else. But basically, all that stuff can be done. So what do you do about it? And the answer is, it's kind of a scary, insidious problem. And it's one of the lesser known things that people sometimes ask about, but they don't know very much about, despite it being very, very common. Before I talk about things you can do to stop it, there is a site called Webgoat. I did put the link to that distribution in there. It is an actual virtual machine, or it's an install. It's a site where you can break everything in the world. So if you've never seen Webgoat, there's actually quite a few of these. Be careful about looking for them, but you can download these distributions and put them on a server. On an old machine, you could put it on a virtual machine or whatever you want to do, and you can actually go in and do cross-site scripting attacks there, because they're vulnerable to it. So you can literally you can try to learn your own cross-site scripting attacks. I'm a big advocate of knowing how things work, because if you know how they work, it's easier for you to figure out how to stop them and to be aware of them going on. So I did put links to that in the show notes if you want to check out sites like that. OWASP has a vulnerability document about that, so if you want to read that, there are some tips about how you can prevent these things. I did put up there's a tutorial site I found called hacksplaining.com. They have some cross-site scripting exercises where they actually show you and allow you to do a cross-site scripting attack in this tutorial. So if you want to see how those kind of attacks can be implemented and so on, go check those sites out. Like I said, I put them in there. So how do you find these things for the first step, and how do you prevent them from happening to you? Well, obviously, if you run automated pen tests are going to find certain things. So if it's a known problem with WordPress, so if there is a known cross-site scripting exploit with WordPress, typically when you run your automated pen test with Kali or whatever, it will detect that and report that there's a likely cross-site scripting vulnerability in your website. Now, what if it's an unknown vulnerability? It's a new version. It's a version you don't have the modules installed for. All of a sudden, you got problems. So, but you should be running automated pen tests against your websites. Better coding. So this is probably my biggest thing about this, is good coding means that you have to take time to do this. And I know everybody's yelling at you to get the website done. Everybody's yelling at you to get it published and get it up and ready to roll. But one of the basic tenets of this is called input validation, and it's an old coding idea. We've had this as long as we've had computer science classes where people actually talked about it. They never really spent much time trying to get you to do it. But an example of input validation is simply I ask you to put in your last name, and I test to see if you typed in letters. Did you type in numbers? Did you type in weird symbols? Did you type something else? If I ask you for the amount and you put AAA instead of 999, okay. Did you put some / escape codes from C? You will see people trying those things if you actually can log what's going on your site. So one of the things we could do as we code websites is to watch for people typing such things. And they actually make appliances and things to try to prevent that or to detect those kind of strings. Certainly tools like intrusion detection systems and intrusion prevention systems often have rule sets that are pre-set up to look for these kind of things. They often were derivative of SQL injection attacks where they were looking for people typing things like 1 = 1 and stuff like that in certain fields. So secure coding, and there's not enough time here for me to get into the whole book on secure coding, but it is possible for you to parse input and look for things people are typing like script commands, $PHP, things like that, when they shouldn't actually be typing those things onto your site. So if you've got a site like Facebook or Signal or whatever that is, and people are typing things they shouldn't be typing in there. Now, like I say, it gets hard because you want to allow people to put all sorts of stuff on there, so you have to be able to limit what they can type without limiting what they can type. But we've seen a lot of that as we see social responsibility pressure start to fall on Facebook, where they're saying you shouldn't be able to do this. Yesterday was a sort of landmark day. The 17th of December was the last day that Tumblr was going to allow what they call adult content. I don't know how you feel about it. It's a political show. But Tumblr said no longer will we allow people to post adult content. So they've started censoring their site. So obviously they've put code validation approaches in place to detect and prevent people from putting certain kinds of things. I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know how controversial it is or how it's censorship or whatever, but it's their site. But they are looking for that. And long before they started looking for porn or they started looking for adult content, they did start looking for certain kinds of strings and things that people were typing in to do cross-site scripting attacks. But as you can see, it's tricky to prevent this because you want people to be able to type special characters. You want people to be able to type all kinds of things to make their point, to use emojis, to use all kinds of other strings, and all of a sudden things get a little bit complicated. You can be sure you isolate things on your page. So if you block everything out and say you can't just put stuff and interact things wantonly, you can build a better website that says this box where you type can't interact with the local system. There's all kinds of different rules and switches that you can actually set on those now. VARs and switches, there are very likely tools in the platform you're using that will allow you to use variables. They may allow you to use switches, and how those are set can affect what that platform will allow you to do. So if you're using WordPress or you're using some other version of WordPress to develop your sites, you should definitely if you just search for and go look for things about that, they often have best practice guides for, I know they have one for WordPress that says here's the things you should do and here's the switches you should set. You should never allow this to be on unless you have some special purpose and you understand what you're doing, so turn it off. And they may not turn it off for you by default. PHP and all these other languages have ways you can restrict what that does on a web page. And by doing that, it will prevent people from running cross-site scripting attacks against you, which can result in liability. Obviously, you need a pen test, but you should not just rely on automated pen test. You need people to look at your sites. If you're running commercial sites or even personal sites, you need people looking at those beyond just that automated pen test so that you can detect new and unusual things that people are trying. So if there are zero-day exploits against WordPress, they may not be in a Kali Linux module. So you need to be doing more than just automating it. I mean, if that's all you can do, then fine. At least you're doing something. But the more you look at this and the more you understand it, the more you can try these things on your own site and say, wow, look at that. I was able to do that to my own site. Please don't do cross-site scripting testing on other people's sites. That's a really bad idea, and they may detect it and they may ban you from their site, or they may, do something bad to you. OWASP has a cheat sheet for a lot of these sites. If you go to owasp.org, they actually have a cross-site scripting prevention cheat sheet you can take a look at. I put a link to it in show notes. I found another article at Comparatech, which again, I put the link to that in the show notes, about securing browsers. So this was some tips for just setting your browser to secure mode. Common sense should tell you some other things. In your browser, there are ways to limit what your browser can do. You can set it where it runs. It doesn't allow scripts to execute without notifying you. And that's a really good one. It's annoying because you may have to go through and approve 35 scripts, and then you may not know if they're good or not, but at least you know they're there. You probably shouldn't allow cookies to be set, at least without your knowledge. If your browser is just wide open like that and people can set cookies, well, cookies can execute scripts. I mean, you can embed code in cookies. You can embed scripts on pages like we've just been talking about. So if you're allowing all that stuff going on, good luck. I wouldn't put anything personal in your browser, but it may already be there. So be very careful about that kind of stuff. And if it's just running in Flash and you want to run Flash because you want to watch HBO Go or whatever it is you want to watch, well, guess what? Flash can have things embedded in it too. And of course, a lot of people don't like Flash because of that. Of course, I could say, well, they don't like PHP and they don't like JavaScript either, because they can all do these kinds of things. The other side of this is be safe. If you're going to sites you don't necessarily trust, and we all do that all the time, that's where you really need to be using some kind of private browser. Now, we've seen evidence that a lot of these browsers are not nearly as secure as they claim they are. That privacy mode, there was just an article last week that Google was still monitoring stuff that was being run in private browsing mode or anonymous browsing mode. So you may want to test these things or read some articles about anonymous browsers to see, are they truly anonymous? Tor has a lot of disclaimers on it about, unless you do it the way we tell you, you're not truly anonymous. But even just running a Tor browser, and I usually run a Tor browser. If I'm going to go to any site I don't have a fairly good feeling about. So if you're going out and looking at hacking sites, which is something I do, a lot of times when I make forensics cases, I'm looking at some pretty wacky sites because I want them in my case. I often run Tor browser to test them before I go there with a browser in my virtual machine for my forensics case. Today, vanilla browsers do a lot more. So if they're set up correctly and you haven't gone in and disabled them, for the most part, they are setting switches to the more strict privacy settings than they used to, where they relied on you to do that. They had a lot of problems with it, so they didn't. But that doesn't mean the browser is not collecting cookies. That doesn't mean there's not data stored in it. That doesn't mean you didn't say, yes, save my password, and now your password and your username is in your browser. So is it encrypted? I don't know. It might be. It might not be. But is there a way to extract it using cross-site scripting? Yes, there is. And if you go to a site, remember, just because you go to normally safe sites, if you go to that one WordPress site that your friend set up and somebody has embedded these things there, your cookies may get claimed by a cross-site scripting attack. So anonymous browsing is better. Some companies are releasing anonymous browser tools, like Avast has one that's called, it's called Safe Browsing or something. I haven't tested it to see how safe it really is. But if you're worried about the sites you're going to, I would definitely be very, very careful. Some sites are famous for this stuff. Porn sites, clickbait sites, all that kind of stuff are famous for having all sorts of problems. And watch for symptoms. If you're on forums and bulletin boards and you start seeing stray code snippets, you start seeing the word script on that where somebody's trying to do something and maybe it's just pasting in his text and it won't let it execute a script, you might want to switch to a little more safe mode to look at that. I actually have a virtual machine that I use that's a fire and forget virtual machine, has Tor on it. If I'm really worried about a site, I go there first with that because I can just delete that virtual machine and roll it back with a snapshot to a clean version where it's never been used on the internet. So if I think the site may be fishy, I use that totally squeaky clean browser with Tor and go there and look at that site first and see if I see anything that makes me wonder if this site's going to be dangerous. And sometimes I really do feel that way. To make sure your sites are clean, test with automated tools, test with pen testing for weakness in design to make sure your sites are going to be there. You got to make sure all that stuff is nice and clean and safe. Make sure you protect yourself from this. Use safer browsing. Use safer browsers. Be careful what you store on your machine and in your browser because those convenience factors often result in danger. Check links before you click on them. Watch for symptoms of dangerous neighborhoods when you do want to go look at something like that because you will start to stumble into problems. It was a long show. This show could be 4 hours long, I think, to talk about cross-site scripting. Thanks for joining us this year. We'll see you in the next year. And thanks for watching Secure Digital Life. Bye.